Welcome back to episode 4 of the 0 to 3k IO score challenge. In the last episode, we were able to exclusively run 18s and above. We had mostly good runs where we got lots of score, but not as many gear upgrades. On the bright side, we reached Keystone Master, which is the first achievement on our way to 3k score. Last video, I asked you guys what your opinion was on me using the helm enchant from the raid, since at this point it was already completed on my account from my main character. As far as I know, I only saw people of the opinion that I could use it, and it is perfectly allowed for this challenge, mainly because it is used by most players at this point in the season and can be obtained in LFR. I appreciate your guys' input, and I'm going to start using it from now on. If you guys want to stay caught up on this series, then be sure to subscribe and ring the bell. If you want to see a similar challenge that I did last season to Keystone Hero as a balance druid, I have a playlist on my channel that you can go to in the top right hand corner of your screen. Alright, it's time for our vault. Since we only have 2 Mythic Plus slots, I think I'm hoping for some Myth Track tier. So I think that'd be a big upgrade. Maybe a really good ring. Yeah, I think that'd be a socketed Myth Track ring. That's not too much to ask, right? Oh, close. I mean, it's not socketed, but I'm gonna run some sims, but they are both haste verse. And it would be the same item level upgrade. Okay, so I think I'm gonna go with the cloak. It does sim a little bit better, and just looking at it long term, there is a haste mastery cloak from a Tall Desire that would be pretty good, probably slightly better than this one, but this is Myth Track. And as for the ring, this one is also not too bad, but I think there's a good chance we craft a ring at some point in this series. And if not, you know, like, I think this cloak just gives us more value right now. Even long term, it's a pretty good cloak, so I think that is the better choice. But honestly, either one of these are pretty good. And we got a 20 Blackrook hold, which this season seems like a pretty easy dungeon. And I've only done a +9 on Fortified Week, so that should be a ton of score, so that's awesome. To try to improve our gear, I want to craft our first embellishment. After some feedback from you guys and looking at top players, I'm going to go with the Frostfire leg guards of preparation. They give me haste mastery, which are my best stats, and an equip effect where whenever I damage a new enemy, I get a haste buff for 10 seconds up to 5 stacks. This should hopefully help me get my Shield of Righteous up faster to mitigate the damage I take at the start of pulls. For the souls that you need to get to craft these pants, I spent some time getting them during the last video, but I decided not to include the footage at the time so that I could show it here, so I think that makes more sense. I spent about 10 minutes or so sending a message in trade chat, looking for a blacksmith who could craft me the pants with a 1k tip. Shout out to Northgan for doing the craft for me. I now have a really good pair of pants at item level 476 by using the enchanted worm's crest that we got from the quest to kill Farok at the end of the Emerald Dream questline. I threw a fierce armor kit under our new pants. I wanted to do some heroic raid for some worm crests, so as you would expect, I accidentally joined a normal run and only realized after killing Narut. Now I actually joined a heroic run. We killed Narut, and this is when I realized that I should put my helm enchant on. We were hoping to get the trinket from this boss, but it didn't drop. Next up was Agira, who could drop some good bracers for us, but once again it was not meant to be. Speaking of bracers, I am considering my next craft to be either Shadow Flame on crafted bracers or the verse bracers, so let me know which is best for this series. Time for Volcaros, and in terms of tank rating, do tanks only taunt when your bigwigs tells you to? The other tank, who was the raid leader, was massively undergeared, so I think they wanted me to taunt early, but maybe I'm taunting too late regardless of their gear. I usually just do it when my add-on tells me, because I just kind of assume that's what most tanks do, but I'm not too sure if it's different in pugs or... yeah. Laradar was a struggle with this other tank since he would just get one shot by the charge. So I spent a while looking for another group and just decided to do keys instead since it was taking a while. I'm wondering if maybe next time I do some heroic bosses, I should make the group myself, since I think I'll have a better chance of killing more than 3 bosses. Our first key was a plus 18 Throne of the Tides. Bursting on fortified weeks can be a bit of a dilemma because you want to do a big first pull with Lust since it allows you to have it up for the second boss, which is usually harder than the first one. If you pull tons though, then the bursting can kill your group. I pulled the bulk of the mobs, then got the last packs so that the bursting stacks can be spread out a bit more. The packs of dogs that apply a dot can be pretty scary, so one thing you can do is either bubble or stone form, which can remove the dots, but usually you will still need some CC from your group, so if you're a DPS or a healer, it is very nice to help your tank out here. The rest of the dungeon was pretty good. Overall, the affixes this week aren't too bad. On my main, I find once you get above usually 22s, your healers improve at handling bursting tremendously, and storming is basically just an annoyance more than an actual affix. We 2-chested the key and got 89 score. The warrior traded me our Bis necklace from Mythic Plus, which I didn't even realize came from this dungeon. So that is actually really nice, and that's a big upgrade. Our second key of the week was a plus 18 Darkheart Thicket. Just like the last key, we did a big first pull with Lust. Something I realized after already being in this dungeon was that I didn't have any invis pots, which meant that we had to do the 2 bears, which on Fort Week is basically a death sentence. I main a balanced druid and have recently been gearing up a mage, both of which have their own invisibility abilities. Luckily, we had a good healer and an augmentation evoker. I did notice by the end of the dungeon that we were a bit over percent before the last pack, which I would assume is a result of the double bear pull. 25 score, and none of the 3 paladins got loot, sadly. So time for our third key of the week, which was pretty controversial. So let me explain the situation and I'll try to give you both sides. So it was time for a plus 19 Everbloom, which is notorious for being rough on bursting week. Since our last 2 keys had no complaints from the healers about the bursting, and as far as I know, I can remember that nobody had died from it in our previous keys. I had said that we would Lust first pull, go to town, but this key was very different. We get about 6 stacks right here from the first pull, and everybody but me dies, and I proc my chi death. No problem though, that had a high chance of happening, and I wasn't very happy with how I personally was kicking throughout this dungeon, mainly the ads surrounding the first boss. It was just a bit messy grouping them, and I felt a bit slow with my reactions. To be honest, the kicks in my group were okay, but they were rarely on the mobs that were far away, which are the actual important kicks, since it allows us to get everything grouped up, makes it easier for me to kick. But since I was focused so much on my own gameplay and my kicks, I failed to notice the healer's mana, which was very low, which is totally my fault. We have dealt with something like this similar in this series earlier on, and almost all of you agreed that it is usually considered the healer's responsibility to let me, the tank, know, since there are so many other things that I need to focus on. And ever since that Darkheart Thicket where that one healer did get a bit upset at me, I've noticed that almost every healer that got lower than 50% mana just told me, hey, I'm just going to have a drink quick, and that was totally okay. The healer drank to about 30% before a swirly made him have to stop drinking. He said that I was impatient as hell, to which the monk agreed with. I do totally understand this, that is definitely my fault, and I didn't realize he was such low mana because by the time I looked at it, he was at 30%, and I never noticed him drinking, but I kind of picked up on the idea that that was probably what he was getting at, and I don't know if these two were in a guild together, but they were from the same server, so I assume they were probably friends, because as you will see later on, a lot of the group definitely ganged up against me. After we killed that boss pretty easily, I might add, I asked if the healer wanted any mana, to which they said not for this part. A bit confusing to me considering the fact that Narut is seen as one of the easiest bosses in Mythic Plus this season, and it was fortified week, so the healing required for that fight is incredibly low. The main problem of this run started on this pull. For lots of keys this season, I have a general idea of the route that can get you to 100%, and like most tanks, I'm still fine-tuning them so that it can fit when my cooldowns are coming up and are coming available again, and just doing trial and error to see what works. For Everbloom, I did not do the same amount of research, which I totally accept fault for, and I plan to have a route pulled up the next time I do this dungeon. So a lot of the pulls I was sort of making up and just kind of trying to do based off what I know as a DPS player for what mobs are kind of dangerous. So I tried to get this cultivator right here, since it's something I can kick pretty easily by myself, and I didn't know it would bring all these flower type mobs with it. Looking back, Lust here probably would have been the best to give us a fighting chance to survive this pull, but like before, we got tons of bursting stacks, which procced my cheat death, and then the other patrol came, which I didn't even think about at the time since I just got procced for cheat death, and I actually ended up dying. I tried to apologize since that's not what I intended for, and I got flamed again by the healer. They also said that any other healer would have left by this point, which is probably the worst thing you can say to try to instill confidence in your tank. I am usually pretty confident in keys, and especially as I get quite higher up, but since I was playing so bad for some reason, I'm not really sure why, and basically getting talked down to the whole key, it only led to more mistakes that made the whole situation even worse. The council boss went well, and same for the mage boss. I quickly realized that during the mage boss that even with all the caster mobs, we weren't going to nearly have enough percent. So yeah, after having a group that was already pretty mad at me, we had to run back to the earlier packs to get even more mobs to kill. Hunter asked why not do the trash after the boss. I'm not sure if this dungeon works like Waycrest Manor where you can go back to the start of the dungeon after the first boss. If there is a way to do that, then that's completely news to me. I tried to kind of diffuse the situation that was coming my way since at this point I was pretty fed up with the entire group being against me, basically since the start. The healer added before the end of the key that knowing the route isn't hard, which I agree, but he also said that he knew it. I understand the tank's job in Mythic Plus pugging is to be the leader, which includes knowing the route and trying to set up the group to have success. But if you are another group member and you can tell that they aren't going to have enough percent, why not say anything? Lots of players, for myself in this situation, I'm new to tanking, and I've only done this dungeon like maybe 3 times as a tank, so my route isn't perfect yet, and I just forgot a couple mobs. It is arrogant and toxic to think that everyone in your group should know everything and always will. While that's the best you can hope for, that's not always going to happen, and clearly he cared so much about timing the key that he should have just put his own ego aside and helped me out a little bit. I specifically remember in a previous episode there was a warlock, and I mentioned that I wasn't too familiar with the route, and he had said a couple things that he wanted to do. I was totally willing to try it, so I said if I miss anything, or if there's any mobs you don't want me to do and you want me to skip, just let me know. That's totally fine. I am 100% willing to try someone else's route to see how it feels. So, we finally get to the last boss and kill it with about a minute to spare, so we didn't even deplete the key. I get immediately kicked from the group, and only Lord knows what else was said about me when I wasn't there to defend myself. The final point that I want to mention is I did the math with an add-on called Mythic Dungeon Calculator. It allows you to put in a time to calculate the score you can or would have gotten if you finished a key at a certain level or a very specific time. So looking back at the footage, before we had to backtrack, we were at about 26 minutes, and the boss took us 2 minutes to kill with Lust, where at the time we still had a 1 minute cooldown, so even if we were able to immediately go to the final boss and Lust was off cooldown, we would have finished around 4 minutes earlier. This would have still been a 1 chest, and finishing at that time, it would have been a difference of 2 score. The members of this group were this mad at me over 2 Raider.io score. Unless I am wrong about something, let me know in the comments, but I'm pretty sure that is the only thing they would gain. It would not have been a 2 chest, and I don't care how serious you are, if you are this toxic and mad over 2 score and 2 wipes, 2 bursting, then you really need to reevaluate if you find this game enjoyable, because I did try to accept responsibility in this group, but clearly they either didn't care or took my messages the wrong way. I tried to let them know that it wouldn't have been a 2 chest anyways, which likely was taken wrong since I did add a LOL at the end, but I was just trying to diffuse the situation and maybe like get them to ease up a little bit. Maybe they would say, you know, sorry, like my bad. But looking back, that was probably rude of me and a little bit naive. But I was fed up with the fact that when I tried to apologize to the group, it was only met with rude comments and hate. The leader told me to F off and then blocked me from messaging them. I tried to message them on a different character or someone else in the group to see if I could explain myself, but I was unsuccessful. These kinds of things can be common in keys when you are still new to certain routes or just playing bad for a key, and you're maybe a little bit too distracted by that and you start making mistakes or missing mobs that you're supposed to pull. Anyways, I wish these guys the best, and I hope that this isn't a common experience for players. So if it is, let me know in the comments about any bad experiences you've had with players that maybe got a little bit too worked up over something that, in my opinion, is, in the end, the result is not too big of a deal. Maybe we will be able to run some keys with viewers on my main that can hopefully foster a bit more of a positive environment for players that are still learning certain mechanics or routes in the game. I don't enjoy these keys, and I don't think they're good for content either, and it's not probably the most enjoyable to watch, but I would much rather show you guys this so that this series can be as real as I can possibly make it. The best you can really do is shake it off and say GG, go next. The next day, I formed a group for my own +20 Blackrock hold. Luckily, this group was very nice. We had some huge DPS coming from all 3 of our DPS players, who all averaged above 200k, and our hunter was at nearly 300k without an augmentation of ogre. Not much to say about this key. I was happy with my performance, and we were going very fast for a +20. Because we timed it, we now have our portal for Blackrock hold, and we got a 2 chest and 57 score. The key turned into a +22 rise. I opted to lower this to a +20 since I am mainly just after my vault slots more than score, because I still want to get some more gear before I do a big push. It was Monday by this point, and players that were still willing to do keys at this point were often under geared or low on score, so I had to take what I could get. We lusted the first pull of a +20 rise and had 2 deaths to bursting with little to no kicks, so a few more deaths were to come. Our healer's gear was alright, but the healing output just wasn't enough to keep up with the mobs on Fort Week. The deaths were already at 10 by the time we were ready to deal with the first boss. I made the mistake of being just a little bit too far from the wall that protects you from getting knocked off. Our mage died from ticking damage during the intermission, and the demon hunter after they got threat when I was knocked off. The healer left and the key was over. To be honest, at the pace we were going with the deaths and damage, I don't think we were going to complete this key anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. Our DPS was quite low with mine even beating the hunters, but that is a bit unfair since I never died, so I had lots of more uptime than the DPS players. I got into a +21 Atal Dazar, which is one of the easier keys on Fort Week. After what happened in Everbloom, I made sure to have a set route open, but Everbloom has honestly been the only dungeon that I've had troubles with the route, since there's so many different pulls and combinations, and I don't know if it's better to change them on Fort Week, Tyrannical Week, bursting, bolstering. So we had alright damage, but nothing insane. Our healer did have a few deaths from general rot damage that the packs on the right side of the dungeon do. After the totem boss, I was trying to kick one of the venom blasts when a DPS player got hit with the unstable hex, which expired on me, which doesn't let me use any of my abilities for a while, and I fell behind. Our healer also got hexed, so he died. I procced my cheat death trinket, and while I was stuck in it, a fear went off from the screecher, so I died. Basically, everything that you could imagine going wrong did go wrong. Nobody got upset, and nobody seemed too worried about the deaths. And one tip for the third boss is that if you're a DPS, when the ad, if it spawns and it's maybe not getting enough focus and it's not dying fast enough, or you have no more CC you can use, you can stand in the blood at the last second, which should last long enough to still be active when the boss does transfusion, which our warrior did a few times during the third boss. Finally, time for Yasma, where the healer did the strat that I personally do like more. Basically, the tank tries to keep the boss in the middle of the room, and when the DPS and the healer get soul rend, they go to a corner, so that if the boss needs to be kited away, it can still be moved instead of it being stuck in a corner. I got another portal for getting a 1 chest and 26 score. If I am remembering correctly, a few of our party members also got their portals, which is awesome to see. I asked the warrior for the gloves that dropped since it'll save me an upgrade on my tier gloves. We gained 232 score, so we are only 40 score away from Keystone Hero, which is where we ended off our series last season. We currently have 5 keys on Tyrannical, where we haven't timed an 18 or above, and 1 on 4 weeks, so still plenty of score to be gained. Thank you guys for watching another episode of the 0 to 3K Raider.io score challenge, and I hope to see you all next time.